Welcome to the Catalyst International Film Festival 2021. We're here for a special event with our four excellent jurors. This year we have our first Short Screenplay Award in association with the Writers Guild of Ireland, which we're thrilled to announce and to have. Script writing is the basic core of all filmmaking and all drama filmmaking, and we're delighted to be able to support new and diverse screenwriting talent. So who are our jury? I'm going to start with the person I know the longest. We knew each other in a former life when he was just an actor. Just an actor, and a brilliant one, but that is acclaimed writer and actor from Ennis, County Clare, Mark O'Halloran. He's worked with all the major theatre companies, and I've seen him in some great shows. But we know, and of course, still acting, still working as in that craft, and working in Shane Meadows' The Virtues recently, and Darklands and Dead Still. But as a writer, we know him for the screenplay for Adam and Paul and Garage, and one of my personal favourites, the television series Prosperity. And I could go on, but we're thrilled to have
anymore. We've had enough of that.
I enjoy.
You squirm though, Mark. It's
Yeah,
lovely.
I'm on there
enjoyable for me. And also next on my screen there is Paddy Slattery. Paddy, among his many talents, he's a writer, director, producer. As I say, the Holy Trinity. He's also a singer-songwriter. You can check out his music on MySpace. He's also a lecturer and a life coach on the board of Filmophily, a college speaker on mental health, road safety, disability, and film and music. He's an IFTA-nominated filmmaker. He has far too many short film awards to mention. You couldn't list them here, but I will highlight Skunky Dog as producer and a wonderful short film that won far too many awards to mention. But his most recent feature film that he wrote and directed, Broken Law, is now currently available on Netflix. We have the wonderful Juanita Wilson, whose short film The Door was nominated for an Oscar in 2010 and went on to win numerous awards and festivals all over the world. She followed this short with the equally brilliant and hard-hitting story of the Bosnian War, As If I'm Not There. One of the most incredibly beautiful cinematic crafted feature films, one of my personal favourites, went on to win many, many awards and IFTAs as well. In 2011, she was named one of Variety's top 10 directors to watch, the only woman to feature on that list. Of course, she went on to make Tomato Red, and I know she has lots of interesting projects in development. And we have wonderful screenwriter and novelist Ailbhe, who has made her name for herself through Ragsy and the Runner, Molly and the Cyclops. She won a Zebby for Best Feature Film Script with the Oscar-nominated short film by Steph Green, Run and Jump, her first feature film, and it was selected as part of the 2010 Berlin Talent Campus Script Station and Sundance Institute's Lab. It premiered at Tribeca and went on to win numerous awards, including the IFTA for screenplay. She has several features in development, Joyride with Emer Reynolds as director, and Sunlight being made as part of the POV scheme for Blinder Films, and I believe you were working with Mark O'Halloran on that as well, Ailbhe, as screenwriting, which is wonderful. And I'm just so thrilled to have the four of you here. Such great talent, and we're thrilled at Catalyst to have the support of such great screenwriters and talent and professionals. So you are the jury for our first ever short script award, which is great. So I was just wondering that when you are on a jury like this, or when you're reading scripts in general, particularly the short form, what is it that you're looking for? Is it definable, or is it something more ethereal, or can you pinpoint or talk about that a little bit more?
Well, I suppose it's comparable to a short story and its relationship to a novel in lots of ways. They are related, but they're not the same thing in many ways. But how you define what it is can be kind of tricky. You often find, I think one of the ways I look at short films is I like to define what they're not. So like taking a whole story of a film and trying to squash it into a short format doesn't work. I think a short film For me, the most beautiful short films are open-ended. They're poems where you take a moment and explore it with great depth and intimacy, perhaps. That you, rather than taking a whole story, you look at a small pattern from within a story, and you look at it that way. I think that's one of the ways of doing a short. And then there are other ways where you can have a short that's almost like a brilliantly crafted joke, that you reveal something at the end. That's quite a familiar trope with short stories or with short films. So there are those kind of takes on it. Sometimes they're bare character studies, just showing a mood, you know.
Mm. I read big batches for various schemes. So say out of 40 short film scripts, generally 5 of them are just unreadable. They're not qualifying. They're not at the races. Like 30 of them are just fine. They're competent, they're solid. And then there's 5 generally just stand out. They stand out a mile. And then you try and decipher what is it, and something that you are just dying to see as a reader is an original voice. And that's hard to define. But when you hear it, it's just so refreshing. You're so excited. And so I'm a bit of a pedant. I'm a bit of a red biro lady. And so like bad formatting and bad spelling and typos drive me mad. Because if you're entering a thing, just spell check the thing. But I will forgive all for an original voice. You know, so I often find the last 2, for me anyway, would be like a really solid, well-crafted short story, and then a burst of originality that mightn't be as well realized, but there's something so exciting. It's hard.
Because I teach screenwriting in the National Film School in Dún Laoghaire, and one of the things that you can't teach is that thing that you're talking about, which is the writer's voice, what it is they have to say that's unique to them, and talent. But it's funny you're saying that about screen formatting, and I'm a total pedant about it with students as well. It's like you'll get away with it a little bit in first year, but beyond that, no. But also the reason is, when I was doing my master's in screenwriting, we were told very clearly by tutors, like you're reading 40, 50 shorts for a scheme, or 10 or 20 or 2 feature scripts. The formatting allows you to read it in a flow, not to have to go back and check what room we're in, what age the character is, what, you know, so that you can just read easily. You should be able to go down. But again, I love that you're saying all will be forgiven if the story and the voice emerges out of that. And Paddy, kind of on that note, is that something you will look at, like formatting, and that obviously the story has to be good, but are there no-nos for you that stand out, like screen directions and scripts and things like that?
I think I always, I'll deliberately read a screenplay, short or feature, but in this context, short. I'll read it as an audience first. And if I'm grabbed as an audience and give it another go, I'll read it as a producer second. So I'll forgive it for any format issues on the first pass if the story is engaging enough. And in the past, I've read a lot of really strong short films that may not be perfectly formatted, and vice versa. Perfect formats, perfect descriptive text, all that kind of crack, but absolutely nowhere for me emotionally to get in to the story. But one thing I generally look for is honesty from the writer, not somebody with notions of trying to be someone else. And I've been guilty of that myself in the early stages of writing short screenplays. I thought I was Tarantino one minute, and I thought I was Andrei Tarkovsky the next. And I was lost. My own voice was lost in the pursuit of trying to be somebody else. So I find 2 or 3 pages in, if it's not honest, it's very difficult for me to get into. And I know a lot of people, a lot of readers especially, have a policy of, you know, if I'm not grabbed by X page, I'm out narratively. But I don't mind having a big payoff at the end if it's ambiguous leading in, if it feels like it's coming from the right place. So I don't like contrivances. I don't like something for the sake of being trendy, or something for the sake of being sexy, or all this kind of stuff. If it's coming from the right place, I'm in, and I will take it into my heart. Otherwise, it'll be very hard for me to get past page 5. And I really do not like, this might sound old and cynical, but I really do not like opening a script that's 25, 30 pages long, and the first page is up all over the map. If you're going to come at me with a 25 pager, at least have some of the basics looked after in the earliest pages. So yeah, I'm quite open, and I'll read any kind of genre, but it has to come from the heart. Yeah.
Juanita, it's something that I was thinking about in terms of putting our own kind of sensibility onto the script. Like it's something I struggle with, and I'm trying to be better at, even as a teacher and as a reader of scripts, is that I have certain tastes and certain sensibilities, and like your films, for me, they're very strong and bold, but they're very poetic and are just a cinematic feast. I've talked to you about that before, the true cinema that your films are. Do you find when you're reading, can you bypass that, or are you always bringing your own sensibility to your read?
Okay, well, the first thing I think that I always look for when I open up the script is surprise, like especially in a short film, like something that's, as has already been said, like originality and authenticity of voice is so important. But ultimately for me, it's the element of surprise, because like a short film is the freest of all the forms, you know, like it just, you can do anything really in a short film narratively, you know, you can take the audience anywhere you want. You're not constrained, you know, by budgets or the market or the industry or whatever. So you always hope that the filmmaker will use their imagination and just take you somewhere slightly unexpected, you know, that kind of takes you on a journey. You start off somewhere and you're not sure where it's going. So like Mark was saying, you don't want something that is just trying to be a short feature film, because that doesn't work. And often it feels like people are taking on too much, you know, that really if they scaled it back and just kept it, as Mark said, this is a little moment and described it really well, it would be more than enough. Do you know what I mean? Because if it's done well, it can be incredibly powerful. So I think the wonderful thing about the medium short film is the fact that you can do so much with it, you know. So you're always looking for that, and it's always a disappointment if it kind of just feels like it goes on a journey that you see with so many feature films. You know, I think that I love things that play with the format and change it up a little bit in that sense. And I love things that pick the structure, you know, that have a clear structure, and that there's a control, you feel there's a control behind it, that there's a master hand behind who's letting you know what you see, when and why, and you're not just being given everything, you know, that someone is saying, okay, that's enough for now, we'll cut here and we'll move somewhere else and we'll give you another little clue and we'll suggest something, and you're kind of having to come along and put it all together in your head as you go on the journey. And that's kind of the craft of it. So even though it's short, I think the craft of a short film, like with a short story or a poem, you know, it has to be so well structured, more so even than a feature. You don't have any time to describe
anything. No place to hide things.
Yeah. So when it's done well in that sense, it's really, really lovely. So in terms of my own sensibility, obviously I would go for things that are as visual as possible. And I would always say to anyone, read over your script, take out all the dialogue, and only put back in what you really think you need. And the audience, they're so smart, you know, they'll pick up just from a look or, you know, an expression on someone's face. Often you just realize they don't need to say it, we can see it in their face. So if you can describe all those things on the page, then it brings it to life, and you're letting the reader and then ultimately the audience do the work. And I think it just engages you in a much stronger way. But ultimately you're looking for something that you didn't expect, and at the end of it, it just stays with you, stays in your head, either an image or something about it, rather than just being an anecdote that pays off there and then at that moment. You go, oh, okay, I didn't get that, or you know what I mean, and clever. But I love the slow burners, like Mark was saying, like that idea of a poem, something stays with you and resonates with you for a long time afterwards.
And I think maybe connected to that resonance, and this is the thing, Vanessa, you were saying that it's kind of intangible, like how do you describe it? But I'm a desperate pickaroony. I cannot stop picking at things I shouldn't pick at. Anyway, and I understand, I feel compulsion. And I think when someone was compelled to write something, it leaves a resonance on the script. And you can imagine that they visited it once and then again until they felt it had to manifest somehow. And they're choosing whether or not they have the craftsmanship to match the compulsion is a different story. But when you do get both of those elements together and they're saying something honest, I think then you have something that's going to stay with other humans, because every human understands compulsion and they understand the release you get when it's realized, and to share that and to get a whiff of that off a script. You think, if this PDF is making me feel like this, imagine if they use all 5 senses and take me somewhere,
I think it's important for young filmmakers or people who are aspiring towards writing of short films is to look at short films.
Absolutely.
They are very different from, and I think like we're very successful in Ireland at creating them. And I think two of the greatest short films that I've ever seen, one is Juanita's film, which is The Door, which is just so unbelievably beautiful. It can't be a film, a feature film. It is solely what it is. It's deeply lyrical, very profound. And then also there's another film, which I feel they're very different at the other end of the spectrum, The Stutterer.
Oh, it's beautiful. Ben Cleary's.
Yes. And weirdly enough, The Door is so visual and it's so poetic and lyrical. The Stutterer is almost about language itself and how we communicate. And again, it can't be a long film. It is what it is. It's perfect in its conception. And I think looking at those for young aspiring writers, looking at examples like these will help them to understand the art of conceiving of what a short film is.
Yeah, it's Joyce's epiphany, isn't it? That moment.
I agree. The Door is probably one of the greatest, or probably the best short film I've ever seen. And it came at a time in my life when I was aspiring to make short films. So it showed me what you can actually do with a short film. And I think the beauty of the short format is, although there are many challenges, many do's and don'ts, you always have the license to be as cinematic as you want to be. And I actually, maybe The Door inspired me to be cinematic first, with my own very first short film, The Moment, or coincidentally it was called. And so yeah, I love the fact that I love the fact that you can be expressive, you can be adventurous, and you can even be a little bit mischievous with short films to catch off your audience. Because I probably the best short films are the ones I go away thinking, that I never expected it. I didn't expect that to make me think about it as much as an epic film might, a feature film might. So, but yeah, if you want to see what potential you could do with a short film, I'd recommend watching The Door first. It's a great doorway into the format.
There isn't a class I teach in IDT where I don't show The Door, and it always floors them, which I love, and they always have more questions than I can answer. I should get you in, Juanita. I know you teach there sometimes as well, but it is that almost the rules with short filmmaking is that there are no rules, like the way we often have to look at the rules for feature screen, whether it's like you said, Juanita, it's marketplace and sellability, or it's structure and how you have to earn your arc or your story if it's the 3-act structure. And I was wondering, Mark, if we could come back to you. So, who we're hoping is sitting in watching today are some of the screenwriters that entered their scripts. Some are maybe complete beginners. Some are, as you say, complete beginners at an older age, or maybe are transitioning from another craft area into screenwriting. And there are some real craft do's and don'ts. We know, what they are, but it's that thing, that visual element, that showing and not telling. Not relying on dialogue and those things. Is there anything, Mark, if you were to say to somebody who is starting out as a craft, okay, watch films is a great one. Watch films.
I would also say, if you want to be a practitioner in any art, watch films, read books, go to the cinema, look at paintings, engage in life, talk to people, listen to people. All of those things they aren't emphasized enough, I don't think, sometimes. Read poetry, watch television, watch documentaries. All of it will flow through you into the work that you do. I would think that there's one thing that really annoys me when I'm reading scripts from writers who are starting out. The screenwriter, moving the camera is none of your effing business. Don't move the camera. It's not your job. Like sometimes they do breakdowns, a camera breakdown for the script. No director is going to thank you for it, and they won't read it. Try and forget the camera is there. Try and tell the story as if you are in it and witnessing it and seeing it, so that when somebody's reading it, it bounces up at them. There isn't a camera in the way. The voices are coming flying off the page at you. Try and immerse yourself in it. I would say that's one thing to really, that's, for me as a reader, that's the most important thing. Get the camera out of the way.
The same question, Juanita, do you want to hop back in there? If you were to talk to our audience about screenwriting, and I mean, it is you facing the blank page, and you know, we can work to demystify the craft and the process a little bit, the structure, but what is it you would say to somebody starting out?
I think following on from what Mark is saying, like you don't want technically to have a camera on the page, but you are the director when you're writing. You know, you are directing the gaze, the attention of your reader and your audience. So to kind of try and think about that, like, so that you start off on a detail, maybe you look at the hand, or you look at, you know what I mean? Try and describe it. So even though you're not saying, you know, we zoom in on a close-up of a hand, but you could just say a hand, you know, fingers tapping on the table, you know, and then, you know, okay, someone's impatient, or, you know what I mean? But try and tell it through detail. And then you can almost have your wide shot by describing, okay, 3 people in a room looking at each other, or whatever, you know. But I think that there is a real opportunity to write that into the script. And I know I probably overwrite script in the literally, you know, character swallows, character blinks, okay, you know, almost too much. That's how I know how they're feeling, because I'm trying to show it on their face. Are they feeling vulnerable, or are they feeling proud or ashamed, or, you know, all the little details. But you try and put them even on the page, because ultimately, without cluttering up the page, it brings you in, like you talk about the gateway into the character, Paddy, and that kind of thing, into their heart. And it just, the more you can give somebody in that sense, without overwriting stuff, but just show them what they need to see, and only that much, and not everything.
You
know
what I mean?
Right. Then you're really using language to direct.
Yeah, you still are writing for a visual medium. And is there a difference there, though, Juanita? Because generally you're writing to direct. Is that the difference maybe there, that you're writing a text that you know you will direct, whereas as writing
this is filmmaking, so it's not just storytelling. Like, storytelling is just this happens and this happens. You know what I mean? It's not just that. This is using all the elements of filmmaking to tell the story. So I think that if they're not there on the page, then the story won't necessarily be as rich. Now, director obviously can make all those choices, and that will be how they bring it to life. But I think if it's on the page, you just give something that has been thought through more, that has more control. Do you know what I mean? You're actually giving them the whole, the piece of cinema, basically. And I think that that's the job of a screenwriter. You're not just writing a story or a novel, or, you know.
Yeah, you're revealing the character story through your visual writing. Yeah.
Can I make a point there? I would say that I would spend as much time on action writing, as in writing the scene, as I do on dialogue writing.
Yeah.
Because that also holds the tone. That also contains the dramatic structure, the dramatic tension. It also is part of the experience of the script. So when I say get rid of the camera, I'm not saying give over dramatic shaping of the action through your writing. It's actually telling you to get into the dramatic shaping of it, and
you're not taking the cinema out of it, Mark. You're not taking the cinema out of it.
I think it's also important to note that there's a time and a place for a directional script. That's later on down the development line. I mean, at the earliest hurdles, you're selling your story first. And if your readers, whether they're producers, financiers, cast, or whoever's reading it, or even film festivals, I mean, if it's not the story grabbing them, they're not going to be thinking ahead of logistics or locations or makeup or art direction or anything like that. That I always write, when I know a script's going into production, then I'll do another version of my script for our editor, or another version of our script for our composer or our cinematographer. And you will tailor it then to those different departments to speak their language, so to speak. But at that stage, it's all about story. And just if I can add about, if I had one bit of advice for new writers, is to read lots of scripts, especially short scripts. Because if you find you struggle to get into a 10-pager or a 20-page screenplay, then imagine what other readers are going to think when they're trying to read yours. So that's where you become, I guess, more aware of the pitfalls. What is it that's boring you about the screenplay? What is it that's not, pulling you in from the beginning? And I think you can learn from other people's mistakes at the script stage for your own benefit, I think.
Yeah, I think like if when you're writing a short film and you have it open in like Final Draft or Celtex or something, you can't actually read it because your fingers are over and you're tinkering with this and changing that. I think you need to like one thing I do is I print it out and then I post it to myself. But I actually say to my husband, post that to me now in the next week. I don't know when it's going to land. So when it comes in, I have to read it, and I'm not allowed to read it with a pen or anything. I just have to read it. I'm not allowed to do anything. I just have to read it and like take time, have a cup of tea and see. And it's like you experience it as a different, like as not the writer. And that's hard, that critical distance to be able to read and not tinker. But it's important.
And if you're boring yourself with your own script, it's time to go back.
I do, Paddy. I know it well.
It's time to go back to the Celtex.
Jesus, what was I on that day? Yeah, it's so important to read your own.
And I think that you should write pacing into your scenes as well. I think it's really lovely so that, that you spend as long putting the language on the page as you intend to spend in that moment, because I think often things are rushed through like this, it's like the action, but actually you're going to be there for quite a while looking at their response maybe, or what they're going to do, or they're trying to make up their mind. So you have to almost find words that don't detract from that, but you know what I mean? It's not words that are kind of slightly non-committal that can just make you hover on the page and just stay with that moment longer, because you have to justify this. The amount of time it takes to read it should be the amount of time you're going to spend with it. So often I find that, big moments, you've read them and they're gone, and you realize actually that's a huge moment. So they should half a page describing that moment, which can be quite hard if it's somebody trying to make up their mind and you're trying to write that in language, because often there isn't words for stuff that you can see. That's the biggest problem. There aren't words for half the things we feel. You're trying to just stuff, and they're looking out the window again, or they're, looking into the middle distance, or I don't know, but you have to find all these ways. But it's so that you can pause, and the reader has to pause and take it in, and then at other times that you're going fast, that the rhythm and pace is actually written into the script itself.
Most interesting things about life, like memory or grief, what do they look like? And I was trying to challenge the students to try and write that not in the way we've seen it 100 times in films. Create your own vision of that. Sorry, Paddy, you wanted to come in there?
I was just going to say, in terms of rhythm and that, sometimes you can tell when the writer was getting hungry or getting bored, especially when they approach a big action scene. It's like they try to just hop, skip and jump over it, to do anything to avoid having to sit down and actually analyze and structure an action sequence. You see, they go through it so fast they forget that, we're reading it for the first time. We don't already know what's going on in your head with it. So, and I jokingly say when I read new scripts and when I'm giving feedback to writers, I'll tell them at page 8, you were hungry. You should have stopped for a break at that point. You know what I mean? So it's just to be a bit more self-aware. And that's a brilliant bit of advice actually in terms of rhythm, because again, it's like writing poetry. There's a music to it, an unforeseen music to even the most mundane of dialogue. And if you don't get your finger on the pulse of that, sometimes you can lose your way a little bit.
Same with tone.
I think tone is the most important, to find tonal consistency across a script. And that for me is the most difficult work, but it's also the most important. I also think that one thing that young writers or writers who are coming fresh to things is to allow surprise for yourself. There's nothing more satisfying, it sounds strange, but that you yourself in a writing session get surprised by what you put down on a page, because you haven't planned it all, and something comes out that you go, "Shy, I didn't see that coming. I didn't see that was there, and I see it now, and that's my work done for the day or whatever. And it's really satisfying. And I think that if you can find a way of allowing that balance between planning and free forming and surprise, then you're in a good place.
Can I ask you, Mark, just on that note, about finding moments of surprise that you find yourself going down maybe a windy path that you didn't quite expect, but you're enjoying it? Because a lot of people, by the time they get into the cell text or final draft, they've already got the outline of the story, and they're almost ball and chain to that sort of outline, and don't give them the freedom to get lost and explore their own story. So is there anything you would do in order to lay a potential foundation for that exploration to happen? Or
sometimes, I mean, I think each project is its own thing. I think that each character will deliver their voice to you in a different way. I think that over planning for me doesn't work. I find that I deliver something that's very flat then, and I have to coast it a little bit in order to get there. Now, that's not everybody's cup of tea. Some people have got a very, very strong overall idea of what it is they want to deliver, and they minutely lock it all down before writing it out. And that works for them. So, but even like when I say surprise in sometimes just the smallest details, like a character will come out with a reply to a set piece of dialogue that you didn't see coming. That opens up a whole other piece of emotional revelation within a scene. And so sometimes it's not just saying, I'm going to riff this whole fucking screenplay, but what you're doing is you're keeping alive the uniqueness of your characters within, from moment to moment, maybe. Does that sound awful highfalutin?
Perfect sense.
Ailbhe, is that something, would you map it out before you go to the first blank page? Do you use
Do you mean for shorts?
For short, yeah. Let's talk about short.
Yeah, page. I mean, you wouldn't want any more than a page. But what I would map out is the arc. How is my character going to be different by the end of this? That's what I need to know. And I start with the end, because I normally sense the end. I normally feel compelled to create someone who's feeling this. And then I weave it backwards. Well, where would be the most interesting place for that character to start for this arc to be satisfying? And then sometimes you're surprised by your starting place.
The key things, when do you start your story? It's so key. At what point do you introduce your characters? What is the start of the story?
And I find that bit reveals itself to me because I don't know, because I always know the end, but I never know. So that's, I kind of look backwards. Yeah. And my act one is generally the weakest, and then it goes back, and then I have to, yeah.
And Juanita, say when you were writing The Door, I know it's a while ago, would you have ruminated it for a long time? I know it was connected to, actually you can tell me.
Yeah, it was based on a testimony, a live spoken testimony that was compiled by Svetlana Alexievich, who put it into an amazing document called Voices from Chernobyl. So it was one of those testimonies. It was like 3 pages and it was very short. And structurally, it wasn't the same. But what I liked was the tone of his voice, of the father figure, Nikolai, the way, the urgency, the way he described things, the way he kind of was trying to make sense of something. He was kind of time jumps, the image of the door through the forest. All those things just were really striking and really moving, obviously. And I don't know, just the idea of starting just with the door and not knowing why and then revealing it just seemed a kind of natural way to do it. And because of that structure, that film, I think it gave life to a film that otherwise could be quite predictable and sentimental or whatever. But because it was able to start in something that you don't really know what's going on, but something's going on, so that draws you in. And I wish I could find structures like that for everything else I do, because I haven't and I can't. And it just, sometimes you're just going through A, B, C, D, getting to Z. And by the time you're at like K, you're exhausted and bored. You know what I mean? So sometimes that's that structure, and I just love things that somehow the structure really fits and works for that particular project. But because of that made that project surprising and unpredictable, and was great. So as soon as I did that, literally then I think I wrote a draft and I tweaked it a few times over the years, but it never changed. I never had to then go, and maybe the opening should be this, or maybe the ending, like the opening was always that, the ending was always the reveal. And within that, it was like almost like, what do I need? And that's all I need. Do you know what I mean? So for me, for some reason, I think it was just that the urgency in his voice and the kind of anger propelled me and set that tone. As Mark was saying, the hardest thing is to set that tone. But because of that, I was able to set the tone, and then the tone was set, and then the script just followed through. And it felt very obvious to me what should be done. And the more I try and do, the harder I find to make any of these decisions. But that one seemed, do you know what I mean? I don't know, it just felt right, the way that all clicked kind of into place. And I wish I could do it again, honestly. I just find now, I don't know how everybody else is, but it's like, well, you could start here, like you're saying, Ailbhe, what's your start? Even if you know what the ending is, you could start here, but you could also start here, or maybe you should start here, or maybe, you know what I mean? They're all equally valid, but I just don't know anymore. I need someone just to go, yeah, that one, because I don't know. The more you try and think about things, sometimes you completely lose, I don't know if it's an instinct or a heart. I don't know. I find it really challenging.
I bet Christopher Nolan never has this problem.
I bet he doesn't. It's probably just me.
He'll just flick a coin and say, right, we're starting here, we'll work our way back.
In a loop. I think that there's one of the things I'm interested in, that what you're saying there, Juanita, that idea of like, it's always the script beforehand that felt that it had the perfect structure, or that felt it was the easiest. I keep a lot of diaries. I keep day diaries where I just write down what I'm doing. And generally I'll be in the middle of writing something, and in my diary it's like, this is the worst. I've never felt anything like this before. This is a blockage. This will never be blah, blah. And then I go to a script from 2 years beforehand and be like, this is the worst I've ever been. This is the blockage. I'm fundamentally not understanding what I'm doing. And I think that sometimes we fool ourselves into thinking these things, or our brain sometimes likes to mug us with these things that we're unable to formulate. But I think that the decision of how to start a film is really difficult. It's really difficult.
Paddy, how much of the script is written in your head before you sit down to write? Let's keep it in the short realm for now. Or are you exploring more as you're going along?
From before the time the phones have voice recorders on them, I'd have a little dictaphone. And generally, most of my ideas, I'd plant the breadcrumbs in my brain consciously during the day. And at nighttime, that moment after second sleep where you wake up, but you're still kind of asleep, those ideas come flushing in. So I have the phone nowadays to capture that lightning in the bottle, you know what I mean? And so I could wake up then properly at 9 o'clock in the morning and listen back and say, okay, that was shite. Or else, once in a blue moon, I'll find an idea that's like, holy shit, there's something here. So I'll take that into, my process is I'm the same every time, and I've never really changed. I find my story in the outlining. And my outline could be an 8-pager. It could be 80 pages. I don't mind. I'm in the Word file. So I'm not hindered by format or structure at that point. I have the freedom to improvise, to riff, to do all that kind of stuff. I've even the freedom to be a little bit inebriated, which I find I'm not productive when I'm inebriated. I have to be dead sober when I'm writing. And when I find my story in the Word format, I'll then import it into cell text. But I will, like Ailbhe was saying, I want to know what my arc is first, and once I know that, I can commit to this person's journey. And if they're not grabbing my attention at that stage, I'll just move on, and I'll find another character that interests me. But I love a character that keeps me awake at night, and yeah, if they're not exciting and unpredictable as well, I find I get bored very quickly. And I've about maybe 100 scripts that I might have started and abandoned because the character abandoned me, you know, that kind of way. So yeah, I am quite regimented in my process. But look, like Mark said, I mean, each to their own. Like, I guess it's personality relative, where I just find a way that works for me. But finding where to start a story, I have to admit, is my biggest challenge. So I guess my advice to myself only recently, and my advice to another writer recently, was, why not just write the whole story of this character? Even if most of it never ever even gets introduced into the film, go once upon a time at the beginning, they're born, etc., and they die, etc., and have a look at a linear structure of what their story is. And then when you can objectively look at where the trajectory of their life has gone, somewhere in that map you'll see little flags telling us, oh, this is an interesting spot, and this sounds like I love, even like The Door, it's sort of mysterious in a way that it invites your audience in to be curious. I love that kind of start, where we don't give them the information, we make them work for it a little bit. So that's generally my emotional starting point in the script.
I think one of the overarching messages of this discussion has been that we all adore The Door, and that's
I know, this is great.
Certainly.
You have made
It's
yeah.
a short masterpiece.
inalienable truth. That's just a truth, and it will stand the test of time. But anybody who goes and watches The Door, because it's available online, I would 100% encourage you to go and see As If I Am Not There. If you love The Door, you will love that film also, because it has all the poetry and cinema and heart of The Door in a feature project, which I don't know how you did that, Juanita. And you're talking about that difficulty to write those moments of pacing, and that's something that I'm going to come to you privately and talk to you about afterwards, because I want to learn how to do that better. That is a real hard part. Or, you know, when a student writes a montage of childhood memories, I'm like, no, come on. You know, you've got to really interrogate that. You know, you can't just leave it there.
Well, I don't know, I guess with the others, but you always put yourself in those shoes. Literally, okay, I'm in this room and this has just happened, and how do I feel, and what am I doing? And do you know what I mean? It's almost like it has to come right through your whole body, almost, to kind of just to really feel in those situations.
If you're not crying when you're writing it, they're not going to be crying when they're seeing it. You know, you can't cry every time, but like when you
Great
first
believer in weeping at the keyboard.
I cry. All of you are here because there is such great craft in what you do. I see poetry in all your work, and beauty, and wildness. We will have to call it a day, and you've given more than enough time to this and to this festival. And thank you again for being on the jury for our first ever Short Script Award. We couldn't have asked for greater stalwarts of the craft. And we will be the winners will be announced separately. But I'd just like to finish up very quickly, and if you could go quickly around to say what you're working on currently, just briefly.
Okay, I'm on part of the writing team for Conversations with Friends, the Sally Rooney, which is Lenny Abrahamson is directing it. So I have a number of episodes in that, which is pretty good. I'm adapting a John Boyne novel. I've got 2 plays going on this year, and I'm writing a screenplay for Lenny, which we're going to make next year. So
not much then.
I'm lockdown. I wrote 10 scripts. That's all I'm saying.
Wow. Did you? That's amazing.
I had nothing else to do. I adopted a cat, but she keeps me busy now, but there was nothing else to do.
Amazing. Thanks, Mark. Paddy?
Well, I'll be applying for a job as Mark's assistant. He's going to be quite busy over the next 2 years, and I think you might need, a shoulder to lean on, I'm at that stage of figuring out where to start my story. I have the story in my mind, but I'm trying to figure out where to start it. It's a feature drama. My working title is Reverse, about a character who thinks they're taking 2 metaphoric steps forward in their life, but they ironically end up taking 3 steps back. So that's where I am at the minute.
Thank you. Ailbhe?
I've got weirdly 2 features going into production on the 21st of June, which is Summer Solstice, and the Summer Solstice is in both features. So that's a canny thing. And I'm doing, so there's a lot of like last minute stuff on those, the page by page reads and all that. And then doing a TV show at the minute with Sharon Horgan, which is great crack. And then a load of films in development and pre-production.
Great. That's amazing.
Mainly homeschooling and looking after kids, but yeah.
We love Sharon Horgan, obviously. That's wonderful.
Mhm.
We look
Yeah,
forward to
she's a very gracious showrunner or room runner, or
amazing. Juanita?
Gosh, I wish I was like Mark and wrote 5, 2, even one script during lockdown, but I found the opposite. I find I'm very, very slow. But I have a couple of scripts that I have been working on, one of which actually I talked to Mark about, that is still on the to-do list. But yeah, no, just a couple of scripts that I have been developing over the last couple of years. And then I was working during the year with the Lear students, the final year students of the Lear, and they're just amazing, and on a short film for them. But based on their own writing, we kind of came up with scenes based on their own lives, and their honesty, both in terms of their writing and in their performance, was absolutely incredible. But because of lockdown, I haven't been able to cut it yet. So as soon as I can, I really want to get in and cut that, because I just think they're absolutely incredible. I mean, both their talent is huge, and it was really fun working with them. So other than that, just try and, before whenever it is, the end of April, have something to show for myself, tear myself away from the fridge, and actually finish something. So yeah, Mark, any tips, please send them my way.
Hang on, I have to interrogate that, Mark. Did you start and finish 10 features in lockdown?
No, not 10 features, 10 scripts. So
okay,
some of them are half-hour television scripts, some of them are hour-long television scripts, some of them are...
I feel slightly better, not that much better. Slightly.
Yeah.
I honestly, it was the only thing that kept me sane. And you know, for me to say that writing is enjoyable, it's not enjoyable for me at all. So like, but I'm tied to my desk. There's nothing else to do.
Yeah.
Well, it makes me feel like I have to thank you a second time. With all of that going on, you took time to give to the festival. I really appreciate it. But I know all of you are busy writing and working and raising families and doing all sorts of things. So massive thanks again. And all I can say is that I look forward to hearing your choices, your winners, but also to hopefully having each and every one of you in Limerick next year, or whenever we can, in a room with people in a cinema watching films, and maybe even having some socializing and some fun, where all the real filmmaking work takes place at the bar. So thanks again. Thanks for giving of your time, and thanks for a great and interesting discussion, and hopefully see you all soon.
Congratulations to all the writers as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Huge congratulations.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank
Thanks
you.
everyone.
See you, lads. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.